Breaking news, people! Stop whatever you're doing because what just went down in the world of reality TV makes every single season of Love and Hip Hop look like a church choir rehearsal. You think you've seen messy? Oh no. This right here is mess on steroids, scandal with extra seasoning, and drama served on a silver platter with Mona Scott-Young herself holding the tray. That's right, the queen of chaos, the puppet master behind every wine glass toss and wig snatch, has finally done the unthinkable. Mona Scott-Young just fired not one but two of the most explosive cast members in Love and Hip Hop history. Yes, KHAOTIC and Lil Scrappy. Gone. Out. Snatched right out of the credits like they never existed. But the way it all went down? Whew, child. Let's just say this wasn't your average, we don't like your storyline anymore type of exit. This was a meltdown so big, so messy, that even the producers were clutching their headsets like, do we still get hazard pay for this? So what really happened behind those cameras? What was so bad that Mona had to stop the show, step in, and swing the executive axe herself? And here's the real kicker. Were KHAOTIC and Scrappy set up, or did they dig their own graves with all that reckless mouth and ego? Buckle up, because this scandal is about to make reality TV history. And I've got the receipts. The rumors and the tea hotter than your mama's stove. Let's start peeling back the layers of this reality TV onion. Because this isn't just a story about KHAOTIC and Lil Scrappy throwing shade at each other for the cameras. This is bigger, messier, and juicier than anything the fans were ready for. And the truth is, these two have been walking around like ticking time bombs since the very first table read of season 12. You ever seen two men in the same room who just don't vibe? Who can't even breathe the same air without throwing a side eye? That's exactly what KHAOTIC and Scrappy brought to the Atlanta set, and producers thought they were getting harmless banter. But what they really got was a full-on nuclear standoff waiting to explode, and explode it did in ways that had security. Producers and even Mona Scott herself saying enough is enough. To understand how it all unraveled, we need to go back to the moment when Mona made the decision to scoop KHAOTIC out of Miami and place him in Atlanta. Because on paper it looked genius. KHAOTIC had already built a reputation in Miami as the loudest, funniest, most unpredictable spark plug of the show. He had the kind of chaotic energy that guaranteed a reaction from everybody in the room, and for a while that unpredictability paid off. Fans either loved him or hated him, but either way they talked about him, and in the reality TV world that's gold. But Atlanta was not Miami. The cast was more established. The alliances were deeper, and the egos were much bigger. So when KHAOTIC arrived with his trademark reckless mouth and over-the-top confidence, it did not translate into comedy the same way. Instead, it created friction. At first it looked like good TV. KHAOTIC cracking jokes, Scrappy clapping back, both of them making confessionals that had the audience laughing. But beneath the laughter was a very real animosity building. The kind of animosity that cannot be contained by editing tricks or staged conversations. People who were on set have whispered that by episode 4, the tension between them had escalated to the point where producers were already pulling them aside, begging them to keep it professional. But professionalism is not in either man's vocabulary. They live for confrontation, and confrontation is what they gave. By the time the cameras followed the cast to London, the situation was already volatile. Think about it. You are flying an entire group of cast members who already have drama across an ocean, locking them into hotels, tight schedules, and public events. It is like shaking a soda bottle and then pretending the cap will hold. Of course it was going to blow. In episode 16, the infamous one fans now replay like a crime scene breakdown. We saw a fraction of what really happened. What aired was tense enough. Scrappy confronting KHAOTIC in front of everyone, telling him he needed to use better words, calling his vocabulary offensive, and KHAOTIC firing back with the kind of sarcasm that has become his trademark. But what the cameras didn't show, at least not in full, was the level of fury in that room. The shouting so loud that production had to cut audio, the body language so threatening that multiple security guards rushed in, and the personal insults so raw they could never be broadcast on cable TV. People present say other cast members looked genuinely afraid, some even leaving the room because the energy felt unsafe. And that is the red line Mona Scott-Young does not tolerate. Drama is good for ratings, but liability is bad for business. And when threats cross from verbal to physical, suddenly it is not about TV anymore, it is about contracts, lawyers, and reputations. The fallout from that London night was immediate. The next morning, there were emergency production meetings, calls made back to the United States, and discussions about whether filming could even continue. The word from insiders is that Mona was furious, not just at KHAOTIC, but at Scrappy as well. because both men had escalated things beyond control. Both had put the entire production in jeopardy, and both had shown that they could not separate entertainment from aggression. People love to paint Mona as the queen of mess who will let anything slide for ratings, but those who know the business side understand she is also a strategist who protects her empire. She knows when to let drama run wild, and she knows when to shut it down before it eats the brand alive. And this time, she chose to shut it down. By the time the cast returned to Atlanta, KHAOTIC was already sidelined. His confessionals reduced, his storyline cut, and the editing carefully adjusted to phase him out without explanation, which only fueled fan speculation. Scrappy, meanwhile, was told point-blank that his behavior had put him on thin ice. And though he had history with the franchise, that loyalty only stretched so far. KHAOTIC would later admit in his own words that he was fired, or as he put it, laid off. But behind that casual phrasing was a real sense of finality. His time on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta was over. The irony is that KHAOTIC tried to argue he could return to Miami's cast, but producers had already decided the risk was too high. Once you cross Mona's line, you do not get a second chance. And no matter how entertaining he was in Miami, the chaos had outweighed the comedy. The whispers among crew members painted an even darker picture. Some claimed KHAOTIC was not just clashing with Scrappy on camera, but was also difficult behind the scenes. Missing call times, arguing with producers, and refusing to adjust his language even when warned repeatedly. Others said Scrappy had become increasingly unpredictable, using his seniority on the cast to push boundaries and test how far he could go. And together they created a perfect storm that was impossible to contain. Fans watching from home only saw fragments, but those fragments were enough to sense something was deeply wrong. The cuts in the episode, the sudden disappearance of KHAOTIC in later scenes, the way other cast members avoided mentioning his name. It was like he had been erased in real time, and the erasure only made viewers more curious. Social media lit up with theories. Was he in jail? Was he banned? Was there a secret fight nobody wanted to talk about? Every theory spread like wildfire, and every rumor seemed more dramatic than the last. In truth, the drama had been too real, too raw, and too dangerous to be reduced to entertainment. And Mona had to make the rare decision of cutting her own chaos agent loose. And that decision sent shockwaves not just through the cast, but through the entire fan base. When the news of KHAOTIC's firing started to trickle into the fan base, it did not feel real at first because this is love and hip-hop. And cast members disappear all the time only to resurface a few episodes later with some wild storyline that keeps them in the spotlight. But this time the silence was different. There was no teaser for his next scene, no mention in the previews, and no sign of him in the group gatherings. It was as if production had cut him out completely, and the mystery only added fuel to the fire. Fans began digging, Twitter threads popped up with supposed eyewitness accounts of what went down in London, Reddit lit up with insiders claiming they knew the truth. And YouTube reaction channels started running with theories that ranged from KHAOTIC being banned from the UK to Scrappy threatening to walk off the show if he stayed. What made it juicier was the way Mona Scott herself was reportedly involved. Because normally she lets the producers handle the mess, but sources say she got on calls the very night of the London blow-up, demanding to know exactly what was said, exactly what was threatened, and how it had spiraled so far out of control. That kind of intervention was unheard of. Because Mona is the architect who usually lets her puppets dance. But when she steps on stage in the middle of the show, it means somebody has crossed a line that could endanger the brand she has built over more than a decade. And then came Scrappy, who thought his veteran status on the Atlanta cast gave him immunity. But even he started to feel the walls closing in. After London, he was no longer filmed the same way. Producers watched him like hawks, waiting for the next outburst. And every time he opened his mouth, there was a tension in the room that had not been there before. He would later go on Instagram Live, insisting he had no problem with KHAOTIC, claiming that KHAOTIC was always playing the victim, stirring the pot and then pretending he did nothing. But those words rang hollow because the footage already told a different story. Fans were quick to point out clips where Scrappy's temper boiled over, his language turned harsh, and his body language made it clear that this was more than just TV acting. This was personal. The scandal became so big that blogs outside of the love and hip-hop universe started picking it up. Gossip sites ran with headlines like Mona Scott pulls plug on dangerous fight, and podcasts dissected every rumor, some even alleging that lawyers were quietly reviewing contracts to see if damages could be claimed. Whether or not that was true, the idea alone was enough to set the internet ablaze. because the thought of legal fallout from a reality show feud was the kind of chaos people could not resist. Anonymous sources claiming to be crew members painted a picture of total mayhem behind the scenes, saying KHAOTIC had been warned multiple times to tone down his language but refused, insisting that the audience loved him for being raw and unfiltered, while Scrappy allegedly told producers they would regret bringing in an outsider who did not understand Atlanta's hierarchy. Those whispers fed the narrative that the whole feud was not just about clashing personalities, but about territory and pride. Scrappy defending his turf as one of the original Atlanta stars, KHAOTIC refusing to bow down as the new blood, and the result was a battle of egos that no script could contain. Some even claimed there were moments when off-camera tempers nearly boiled over into physical altercations, and security had to step in before it became a headline for the wrong reasons. Fans who watched closely noticed how in group scenes after London, the tension was so thick it was almost awkward to watch. Cast members like Bambi and Spice keeping their distance, trying not to be pulled into the crossfire. And that spoke volumes about how toxic the atmosphere had become. What made it even messier was the way KHAOTIC addressed his exit once he was finally gone, jumping on YouTube to say he had been laid off, almost casual about it. But underneath his words, you could hear the sting. He claimed the situation with Scrappy was the real reason he was no longer on the show, that he had been misunderstood and set up to fail, and that producers had edited him into the villain role no matter what he did. His fans sympathized, arguing that he brought comedy and energy to a show that was otherwise recycling old storylines, while his critics clapped back that he was toxic, offensive, and unprofessional, making everyone uncomfortable and dragging the show into dangerous territory. The divide in public opinion was sharp, and that divide only fueled more debate, with people on social media taking sides as if it were a heavyweight boxing match, Team KHAOTIC versus Team Scrappy, each side throwing digital punches in the form of memes, comments, and viral threads. Mona Scott stayed silent publicly, which only added to the suspense, because when the queen of drama refuses to speak, you know the stakes are too high. Behind the silence, though, insiders claimed the fallout was already spreading. Sponsors allegedly expressed concern about being associated with a franchise where cast members were making threats on international soil. Lawyers were supposedly reviewing footage to see what could be used or cut to protect the brand, and production assistants whispered that entire episodes had to be restructured to erase KHAOTIC's presence without disrupting the storyline flow. That kind of re-editing costs money and time, and it showed how serious the producers were about distancing the franchise from the scandal. Scrappy, meanwhile, started facing whispers that he too could be next on the chopping block, and while nothing official was said, the tension in his appearances told its own story. He was still there, but he was no longer untouchable. Fans who had watched him since the early seasons began to wonder if his reign on Atlanta was finally coming to an end. If Mona was ready to clean house and move on with a new crop of cast members who could deliver drama without the risk of lawsuits and security nightmares. By the time the season limped toward its finale, the energy had shifted, the laughter was forced, the storylines felt patched together, and the absence of KHAOTIC was a ghost haunting every scene. Viewers knew something massive had gone down. They could feel it in the cuts, in the awkward silences, and in the way even the confessionals seemed to dodge the elephant in the room. The scandal had escaped the screen and taken on a life of its own, leaving everyone guessing what the long-term fallout would be as the dust began to settle. The aftermath of KHAOTIC's firing and Scrappy's tarnished image revealed just how fragile the world of reality television really is, because what started as petty jabs between two cast members spiraled into a scandal that touched every corner of the franchise, from the editing bay to the executive offices, and even to the fans who felt betrayed by the silence. Behind the cameras, producers were scrambling to repair the damage. Insiders claimed entire meetings were dedicated to figuring out how to salvage the reputation of the show without admitting how bad things had really gotten. Some whispered that insurance companies had started asking questions about liability and security procedures during international shoots. Others said that Mona herself was furious not only because of the fight, but because she now had to deal with corporate partners breathing down her neck about brand safety. Scrappy may have escaped official firing in the immediate aftermath, but his days of being untouchable were gone. Every move was monitored, every line was reviewed, and every outburst was noted. His veteran aura could not protect him forever, and the possibility of him being the next to go became a rumor that gained traction with each passing week. KHAOTIC, meanwhile, leaned into his new narrative outside the franchise, using YouTube and social media to tell his side of the story. painting himself as a misunderstood entertainer who was sacrificed for the sake of television politics. He told viewers that he had not even spent the money from his love and hip-hop checks, that he was financially fine and spiritually blessed, and that he was moving on to bigger things. To his supporters, he became a symbol of someone chewed up and spat out by a machine that only wanted chaos until it became too real. But to his critics, he remained the loud, reckless energy that finally caught up with him. The wider public reaction kept the story alive far longer than the season itself, because every time KHAOTIC posted a video or Scrappy went live, the comment sections turned into a war zone, fans dissecting every word, every expression, every slip of the tongue. Some argued that Mona had played both men like pawns, letting their feud build until it created maximum buzz and then cutting ties once the risk outweighed the reward. While others insisted that this time Mona had been forced to act against her usual instincts because what happened in London was more serious than anyone outside truly knew. Rumors of threats, near physical altercations, and even off-camera confrontations circulated wildly, and while none could be confirmed, the mystery itself kept people hooked. Podcasts, gossip blogs, and YouTube channels milked the scandal for months, creating fake investigative breakdowns and so-called leaked documents that only blurred the line between fact and entertainment even more. But the very existence of such speculation showed just how much the franchise had been shaken. By the time the next season was announced, viewers were still asking the same questions. Would Scrappy still be there? Would KHAOTIC make a shocking return? Would Mona address the scandal directly? And each question kept the conversation alive. Proof that the chaos had worked both as a curse and a blessing. The truth was that Mona had managed to pull off the impossible once again, turning even the exit of cast members into part of the narrative machine, making fans desperate for answers and gluing them to every update. The scandal may have damaged reputations and strained relationships, but it also ensured that love and hip-hop remained in the spotlight, proving that in this world, even the worst moments can be spun into ratings gold. KHAOTIC's absence became its own storyline, Scrappy's shaky future became another, and Mona's silence became the biggest cliffhanger of them all. Fans kept debating whether the firing was the right move or just a convenient scapegoating, whether Scrappy deserved to stay or whether his time was done, and those debates kept the brand alive long after the cameras stopped rolling. The story of KHAOTIC and Scrappy's explosive fallout was no longer just a subplot on a reality show. It had become a cautionary tale about how thin the line is between entertainment and disaster, how quickly a career can shift from viral star to expendable liability, and how in the Empire Mona Scott Young built the drama never ends. It just changes faces. So now that you've heard the full breakdown of how one of the wildest feuds in love and hip-hop history spiraled out of control and ended with Mona Scott swinging the executive axe, the question is, what do you think really went down? Was KHAOTIC unfairly painted as the villain and sacrificed to protect the brand, or did his reckless energy finally catch up with him? Was Scrappy the victim of a messy setup or the mastermind who underestimated how far the cameras would go to expose him? The truth is, we may never get the unedited footage or the real behind-the-scenes receipts, but the debate belongs to you. Drop your theories in the comments and do not hold back. I want to know if you think Mona was saving her empire or just playing her cast like pawns in her game of ratings chess. And if you live for this kind of deep dive into the chaos behind the reality TV curtain, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with every friend who loves messy drama, and subscribe so you never miss the next scandal breakdown. The story might be over for KHAOTIC and Scrappy, but the tea never stops brewing here.